Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Matt Ipri from Decision Lens, and we are thrilled and excited to have you all join us this morning for another of our webcast series. Our topic today is a pretty interesting one, focused on how the changing environment, the changing drivers that IT organizations are facing are sort of forcing the way organizations have to do planning and technology planning and decision making of all those things. And so we'll be delving into the ramifications of those factors and how there are good ways for you to improve your technology planning process and your decision making altogether. Again, my name is Matt Ipri from Decision Lens, but really our other speaker is our guest of honor today, and I'm pretty thrilled and excited to welcome Bobby Cameron from Forrester to our event today. We've got the privilege of working with a number of the different analyst firms, and I've got to say I'm always most impressed and most excited to be working with Bobby from Forrester. His knowledge of CIOs, his knowledge of IT planning processes, all those things is always great, and so we're quite honored and quite thrilled to have him on the event today. I'll do a very brief intro of Bobby, but then he's going to introduce himself, so we don't have to worry too much about this. But at the end of the day, Bobby serves CIOs. He's one of the main principal analysts at Forrester, focused on the problems of the Office of the CIO. From movement to business technology, from demand management to IT governance, to setting up an IT structure, to planning, architectures, all the different things that the Office of the CIO cares about. Bobby is in the middle of, and he's worked with customers for many years on really picking the right technologies and building the right roadmap and building the right toolkit to empower the organization to move forward and to really be transformative as best they can. So we're thrilled and excited to have Bobby, and after just a few seconds, I will introduce to him, and you'll get the meat of it there. So a few minutes on logistics, and then we'll get going. Our discussion today will really have a couple parts. The main section is all about Bobby and his view on why rapid, flexible technology planning is so important. I'll have a bit of an intro and then a bit of a section after his. We'd love for you to submit your questions throughout the event, and the way to do that is to use the chat section of the web conference platform and send your chats to Maddie Scott, our host. Look for her name, send her a chat, and we'll collect those questions and we'll answer them at the end. We'll try and get you out of here in about 45-50 minutes. We don't want to waste your time or your whole hour, so we'll try and stick to that, but get a couple questions in. And then finally, since the most common question is always, will we share this content? The answer is yes. All of it that can be shared will be shared with you as a registrant following the event, as well as a recording. So you'll be able to watch that again, or if one of your colleagues isn't able to join, or if you have to leave early, you'll have the recording there for you. All right, so with housekeeping out of the way, in front of you is sort of our plan for the session. I'll chat a little bit about strategic technology planning and why it's really essential for your business that is growing and maturing and transforming to have really powerful strategic driven technology planning and why it's essential and what problems it really helps work through. Then Bobby will have the meat of the time to talk us through all the different factors that Forrester is seeing and he's seeing in his research about why your technology planning needs to be, flexible and continuous and dynamic, and why that demand is very changing. And then finally, I'll give a few minutes at the end about how Decision Lens helps some of that be possible and how we help some of our customers make that planning, faster, easier, and more analytical at the end of the day. So short and sweet, and hopefully a pretty good event. And again, please send your questions to Maddie Scott via the chat if you've got any, and we'll get them answered for you as we can. All right, so with that, I think when we talk about strategy-based technology planning, the way a lot of organizations we work with and what we hear a lot of times, that it really starts with questioning the current state about planning and about your organization and about how technology decisions are made. Easy questions or hard questions, like how do you prioritize? How do you actually look at the different options on the table, the different initiatives you are considering, the different projects that are ongoing or being requested new, and look at them side by side and order them? Do you do it at all? How do you quantify the value of those projects and resources? A lot of them don't have a very specific quantitative value to it. So how do you look at them individually and compare them to each other and decide which ones really are more valuable? Can you do it quantitatively? Do you have visibility into all your resources? So, people, dollars, devices, these different things you need to make an initiative successful. Do you have visibility into that? Are you agile and flexible enough in reacting to changes, maybe after your annual plan is made, to react to those insights and to say, okay, maybe something changed, a new competitor, a new product, a new idea, a new request from the business. Are you agile enough to react to that and change your plan? And do you have a clear and agreed upon rule for decision that all the different folks, from your business unit partners to your division owners within IT, to all the different groups, your capital groups, everyone who's got a stake in these decisions, that they understand how we'll make decisions, how we'll compare, what our criteria is, what matters. And it's those questions that, when we actually ask ourselves them and look into them, that reveal some potential big organizational issues. And it's important to sort of uncover these so we know how to react to them as best we can. What we often find is inefficiency and redundancy in the portfolio. If we're doing the same thing multiple times, or we're using resources in inefficient ways, or we're doing things that don't align to strategy, we're most likely dragging down our speed, we're dragging down our ability to deliver, we're dragging down our performance, all the things we'd want to do, so we're eventually dragging down the business. We probably find that we're underinvesting in transformation and growth. How have we given enough resources from run the business or keep the lights on technologies to transforming the business? We're probably not funding all the needs and requests we're getting from our business unit partners. When we get a list of requests, what percentage of them are we able to deliver on? How many of them sit unanswered for years? Do they even know that data when they make a request? Do we give them any feedback at all? We're most likely not answering all the needs we can, and that often leads to a strained relationship between IT and the BUs who have the needs or believe they're funding it, etc. And so those realities are the problems that smarter technology planning solve as it moves through it. And so clearly, it seems obvious and essential that a more intelligent planning is the answer, but it's hard. You need drivers to actually take it on. That's a lot of what we're talking about today, and a lot of what Bobby will really get into. What are the drivers that actually push you to take on building a smarter technology planning process? And I got a couple of them here. Things like finding more resources for transformation, giving more transparency to selections and decisions that are made within IT so the BUs know it and see it. A need and a drive to cut IT costs, or maybe change the percentage of costs that are spent on transformation and growth from run the business. And then really creating real, effective, enforceable IT governance. I've said it a lot of times, maybe some of you have heard it even. IT governance is often a bad word, and it doesn't need to be a bad word. IT governance in a lot of ways is what makes groups hum and successful. And so those drivers can push you to take these things on in a lot of ways. So with sort of those drivers as a backdrop, it is my pleasure now to turn it over to Bobby Cameron to talk a bit about Forrester's view on this topic and what it looks like. So Bobby, it is
Great.
All yours.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, I appreciate it. And what my task is today is both simple and challenging. I've been doing research for a very long time on governance and on prioritization, the kinds of resource demand management that Matt was just talking about. And there's a huge acceleration over the last 12, 18 months in interest in this topic and confusion about how things are changing. So what I'm going to do is set up how Forrester sees the change in business enabled by technology, driving a change in how each of us has to deal with these complex and complicated issues. And as I get started, I want to take just a second and say this is not isolated. The kinds of challenges I'll be putting out there are not isolated to, consumer-facing firms, retail, financial services, media, those kinds of things. I've done work with aerospace and defense, some of the largest U.S. federal government agencies, industrial sector manufacturing. It's everywhere. And you'll see as I build it out, it makes a lot of sense. So certainly if you've got any questions as we go through here about how this might be relevant to your firm or how a specific situation you're facing might make you question what I'm talking about, don't hesitate to ask because somebody else is likely to have a similar question. All right, so what's this accelerating demand? What is this story? And I'll approach this from the concept of how companies are being customer obsessed in order to respond to shifting technologies. And you'll see I'm going to talk at a pretty high level. Hopefully my examples will bring it down to earth, but the changes truly are significant at a high level. The storyline is this, it's about technology changing the business we do, enabling new customer expectations and redefining the work we do to respond to those. And the starting point is the digitally empowered customer, the mobile phone, the smartphone. What's that, 8 years old? It has totally redefined what any of us, whether we're looking at customers, our trading partners, our employees, all of us are expecting and demanding new value models for what we do. And that change in expectations isn't just a one-time change, it's continuing to go forward. And look at this Pokemon Go thing. Try to imagine how that could impact, I don't know, field service operations, those kinds of technologies. Huge opportunities for radically transforming what we do, and that's what's setting our expectations. Now, looking at how companies are responding to those shifts in expectations, they're becoming digital businesses. And a lot of time when we think of digital, we get locked into mobile devices and websites and think, okay, that's digital. Well, certainly from a customer experience or user experience, the mobile and website transformation is huge. But equally as important is the operational transformation. My favorite example there is looking at some of the manufacturing companies who are using digital technologies and big database formed insights to drive 20 to 30% improvement in cost of goods sold by essentially putting software robots into the process flow and analyzing the data in that flow. And this is occurring for companies who've already applied Six Sigma and ISO 9000 styles of defect reduction in their activities. So this becoming a digital business has a significant impact across the company. And as a consequence of that, there is true disruption occurring in markets where entire industries are being redefined, how they compete. Utility companies trying to improve the service delivery, not just to sell more electricity, but to in fact change how each of us as consumers of electricity form our opinion and our approach to responding to the realities of our environment. So you see people like California Edison working with smart thermostats in customers' homes to avoid rolling brownouts that have been the approach to managing peak demand that gets beyond what the grid can handle. Instead of doing that, they're working with customers who are willing and who have the equipment installed to temporarily lower or reduce the amount of air conditioning occurring that creates some of the surge in demand, and making that a way they balance things out. That's redefining the role of that utility in the life of the customer. And utilities all around the globe are looking for ways to change how they do business. So that's the overarching storyline. Now let's look a little bit deeper. The core here has to do with information. That's how it hits us in tech management, in IT. And that change in how information works, we call the age of the customer. And traditionally, companies, institutions have had control over the information. And what's happened is through the smart devices and the internet and the amount of information that's available online, our customers, our employees, trading partners, each of us has much more access to information. And we also can gather together to exchange insights and to improve our ability to compete and to drive those companies who provide products and services to us, can drive them to do what we need. And that shifts the powers more toward the customer, more toward the outside point of view. So this age of the customer, enabled by the digitally empowered customer, creates the need for companies to respond. And those who are doing a good job, we call customer obsessed. These are companies who are doing things differently, paying attention to these digitally empowered customers. And so here are 4 principles they're following. The first is shifting from customer aware, sort of that voice of the customer kind of thing many of you have already been doing, into being customer-led. What does that mean? That means design thinking, where we look at not our product or service out and how someone wants to consume it. That's a pretty limited, narrow point of view. We might actually do that customer-aware, where we say, oh, how many people want it? Do they want it in blue, green, or red? No, this is a different approach. This says, what is the customer doing, and how does that journey they're on impact their demand for what we're doing, and how does that impact how we position it, sell it, service, their consumption of it. A great example is one of my customers manufactures office furniture, and for years they've been selling that office furniture into the businesses who want to buy office furniture when the business is ready to buy. They do some journey mapping and discover, no surprise, that the customers actually engage 2, 3, 4 years before they buy furniture in design and planning where they want to build a building or rent or however they're going to acquire space, the kinds of things they want to do there, designing the space, thinking about how they want their workforce or to be in the space. All of those things influence the type of furniture they buy. So this company is shifting its whole sales and service activity, and they don't sell direct, so they go through distributors. So how they work with their distributors to position those products and services into the customers. And so that's a customer-led point of view. It's not I've got a nice table and a chair and I want to sell it and I'm trying to improve my competitive products. Yeah, I've got to do that. This is beyond that. How am I, in fact, driving new value out? And one of the ways that's done is instead of just having lots of good data, by the way, on average, we use maybe 10, 12% of the data that we've got globally. I need to be insights driven. What that says is I get the right data, not just lots of data. I get the right data to develop insights on that data, use that to drive action, and then create a feedback loop where I collect learning from the actions that are driven to inform my response back out to the customer, to the value stream. So that insights driven, that office furniture example, it was insights from analytics about how customers were behaving and where they were, how distributors were working with customers, that led that company to start changing how it's selling and servicing its customers. So customer-led, insights-driven. The third one, most of us have been trying to work on forever, is fast. And we've got to be able to move increasingly fast because these digital events and digital cycles are incredibly short and getting shorter. And finally, they've got to be connected. And I'll dive into this a little bit more in a minute because it's very critical to how we deploy technology. But connected meaning we operate increasingly end-to-end, not just across our own internal processes. That's a classic kind of concept. But in the entire value stream from the customer, that's why it's customer-led, through what kinds of channels and interfaces that customer has as they participate in the value stream based on their world, not ours, remember, into our companies and even upstream beyond us into our suppliers and trading partners who help us create value. So this is the model that the digitally empowered customer, this age of the customer, is demanding that if we're customer obsessed and they're trying to compete for their business, that we deliver. And I made the argument right up front that this is a digital-based transformation. This customer-led, insights-driven, fast connected. This change has to occur in order to meet these principles, has to occur in a digital basis. That's where we come in, right? Now, I'm going to presage something I'll say a little bit later as well. In the U.S. last year, Forrester measured about 7% of technology spend outside of the CIO's organization. Now, those of you who are in engineering-based companies know that sometimes that might hit 30%. This is beyond that or different from that, in that these are companies who are working with an agency, let's say to build a marketing app, or maybe working with some third party to build an app for a mobile device. This is not traditional shadow IT. This is digital deviation from the base. And as a consequence, these kinds of changes, as they occur, are not only driving shifts in how we deploy technology, moving to digital, but it's also transforming how we actually operate the technology itself. So what does that look like? Well, here's one level from looking from the top of the company down, where those principles start to change the structure, culture, talent metrics, processes, technology. Most companies who are becoming customer obsessed, adopting this new style of operating model, are pulling a lot of these levers based on the context of these principles in order to become digital businesses. Let's bring it back to the technology planning now and how that works. If a company is shifting its structure, working with a electric utility this morning, who has created a whole unit to create brand new customer services, that structural change all of a sudden says, okay, if I'm that utility, I may have historically been operationally focused, driving cost reductions and looking for stability. Now, all of a sudden, I've got this customer-facing organization that's trying to create and drive new value and be innovative. I've got to come play. And it's a structural change, and the technology shifts becoming digital. So you can sort of see how companies, corporations, maybe driven outside even of IT, are driving these kinds of changes, driven by that customer-empowered, digitally empowered customer. And here are a couple of examples of how that plays out. The digital touch points, shifting to products and services. You get a company in healthcare, Philips, who makes Royal Philips, who makes heart monitors, those kinds of electronic machines, is now wrapping software around those machines. So instead of a single point in time, maybe once an hour, when the nurse walks into the room collecting the data, now that metric can be gathered on a continuous basis, put into some sort of a data stream, insights developed on that, and based on knowledge about using cognitive computing techniques, knowledge about the context for that particular patient, deliver insights that then get stored in an electronic health record. That starts to be an integrated piece of the value created by the whole care delivery system. And it's a whole brand new digital operational interface that improves care delivery. Same things you can see through these other pieces of how the principles are playing out. And again, if you're in a company that's trying to plan for this level of change, it starts to create some significant issues. And these issues don't just stop at the digital experience itself. So looking at the impact on the marketing and security and customer experience leaders who are dealing with mobile devices and websites, they're starting to reach deep into the company, across the company, changing business processes. So you look at a company like Bombardier Transportation, who creates trains, and they're engineer to order, though they're trying to move to more systems-based products. And a lot of their business, a lot of their profitability comes from aftermarket service and parts, because trains last a long time. What Bombardier has been doing is using big data, analyzing performance of specific components or subsystems in one train, and then trying to relate that performance. So when does it need maintenance? What's its failure rates? What are the types of parts that are failing? Use that information and analyze what other customers have as trains employed, and use that digital predictive maintenance to feed out into iPads in the hands of other customers a shift in their maintenance planning based on near real-time data of other people who are using similar systems. That's a shift in the whole maintenance and service process from, okay, I pull the train off every month or 6 weeks or whatever to do some scheduled maintenance. This is a whole different approach that says we can improve the performance of that device by keeping it online more. And the more I do of all these things, I become more and more of a digital business so that I can now operate much more end-to-end across the whole value stream, deploying the digital experience and digital operational excellence to drive the results. And so from an IT perspective, a tech management perspective, as we move along this arc, our planning activities require richer data, a lot more understanding of what's going on, and we have to be able to change what we're doing. And to make all of that real clear, one of this end-to-end transformation that's occurring is a critical part of what's happening. Back in the 09 timeframe, Forrester looked at buying of critical technologies like cloud and analytics, big data types of technologies, mobile, and we saw a pattern of significant buying that was more of a traditional bell-shaped curve. And what has happened throughout history, we've seen these trends occur 4 or 5 times over time. What happens is people start getting excited about the technologies and buying a lot of them, and they build up a surplus of the technology, and that's sort of their acquisition. Quit buying for a while they digest that acquisition, and so it creates this more bell-shaped curve of consumption. And those patterns we expected to follow through for these SMAC technologies, and we expected it to flatten out in 16, 17. We're not seeing it flattening out. And in research we did last September, what we found was the buying pattern of the customer was moving from these point solutions to a whole different application of the technology into end-to-end solutions. And we saw that occurring in 3 phases. For this talk, I'm not going to really break out the phases a lot, other than to show you how, as companies move along this curve, the role of tech management changes. Look at that bottom line there. In the point solution, let's look at something like a customer experience application. Well, if I've got a third-party agency building out a mobile app for me, and I'm a marketing organization, and I'm only dealing with IT really for integration and that sort of work. But the more I move into an end-to-end solution, the more I have to consume tech management only skills, as the skills that the tech management has that other parts of the organization do not have. To the point where, as I'm operating end to end, where I'm actually including the full range of the value proposition, I have to deal now with IT much more completely if I'm the marketing guy, in order to compete, in order to drive the value proposition. It's that end-to-end work that's accelerating or continuing to accelerate the growth in purchasing of these technologies that actually been around a while, and by more traditional modes of consumption should be flattening out. This end-to-end work then starts to make me change how I operate. What does that look like? Well, think of somebody like a Home Depot who is trying to sell something or close a sale, and they have a checkout service that they provide. That checkout service might historically have been, okay, so here's a screwdriver and it's going to cost you $5, and here's your credit card. Okay, done. Well, what they're trying to do is make that process of checking out much more sophisticated, so that they're engaging around what kind of customer are you? Are you a maybe a contractor, or maybe you've got some sort of a volume-based deal? What kind of a marketing program do they have going on? Buy one get one free types of things. Are you going to take this home with you? You're going to drop ship? Does it require assembly? All these other activities that require multiple back office systems to do the checkout. It's not just a payment activity. Also, you get a variety of ways the customer's checking out now. Point of sale system, kiosk in store, mobile device in store, mobile device in the hand of a salesperson out in the field, website, call center, IVR, all these different ways to check out. And so what Home Depot has done is created a thin layer process and technology, what I call a continuous business service, to allow that checkout to occur consistently across all those platforms. Well, but each platform has a different thing. Call center's got somebody with a script and the ability to reach into rich data and listen to the customer and guide them through. That's a very different experience and use of the checkout than is going on if the customer is doing a checkout on a kiosk in the store. So you've got to be able then with this service, or Home Depot does with this service, is create some consistency and predictability of the back office part while supporting all these various ways of interfacing with that service that are tuned to the specific channel. Now let's take that concept and say, okay, wow, what is that? Well, it's not a point solution because it reaches all across all of these different parts of the company. And by the way, it's not a static solution. They cannot build that as a standalone piece because of all those different systems, the engagement systems for the customers and the back office systems to look at inventory and shipping and all those pieces. They're all changing based on other pieces. So what happens is that service actually at Home Depot gets updated every month. Even if there's no new functionality being put in, it's in a continuous sprint where the drawdown against the backlog is essentially defined by what all the changes are that have to occur in the interface layer to make it so that the consistency is maintained for the checkout service. That's what end-to-end is, and it's pulling us in more and more into these digital customer experience and requiring us to have that digital operational excellence across the value stream. And now I'm going to paint a picture I'm trying to drill down a little bit for how it changes how we behave in the tech management organization. And I'm going to use the language complex versus complicated here. So hang in there for a moment. In this 2x2, in this XY axis, the vertical axis is increased uncertainty of what we're trying to do as you move up. And as you move to the right, the x-axis, it's much more uncertainty about what I'm going to do to respond to that need. How I'm going to do it, how I'm going to actually implement a solution. Well, what we're left is simple stuff, and we're kind of done doing simple stuff. Most of us have been working on complicated. That's where most of the technology world, certainly since Y2K drove ERP acceleration in the late 90s, but websites and those kinds of things as well. What I'm arguing here is the complicated world is kind of like building a bridge. If we get a bunch of smart people, we can build point solutions. We know how to do it. It's hard work. We concentrate on it, and enough time we can make it happen. In the age of the customer, the kind of work that we're doing to understand and respond to the customers and this end-to-end value proposition that's moving increasingly quickly, like that Home Depot checkout example, this is complex. It's more like managing traffic in Manhattan. We can build guardrails. We certainly can put in stoplights and understand what's going on and put measurements of traffic flow. But then you get an unplanned demonstration, or you get a blown water main, or you have some other weather event that occurs. You get all these things that are unplanned, and we've got to be constantly responding to that. And that means we are actually having to implement solutions that respond to unexpected or previously unexperienced conditions. That's complex. And we call this business technology, BT. That's typically focuses on systems of engagement. So that's where we interface with employees, customers, trading partners, or systems of insight, where we're bringing analytics in and driving action with insight, or systems of operation, Internet of Things. All of that world is bringing more and more information into our world that we can drive analytics, insights that drive action, and we also can do test and learn kinds of agile methodologies to respond. Huge shift in how we manage our technology to deal with that complex world. So, age of the customer, digitally empowered customer, driving firms to become digital businesses. That means they're customer obsessed. They need to be customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected. And they start with mobile website kind of experiences, digital experiences, but they're moving into processes as they become digital businesses. And as they do that, they have to manage not only traditional tech management that's getting complicated, but also this business technology world. What are they having to do? How do they implement these principles as they move forward? They're doing it in these 5 high-level statements of where the capabilities for technology management are changing. And I'm not going to dive deeply in here, but what I'm trying to do is help you get the picture that your planning activities for the technology and where you're going to fund and how you're going to move forward is getting incredibly difficult to deal with in unstructured, unplanned, unautomated mechanisms. So continuous delivery. That's Agile plus DevOps. So I can constantly be changing things and rolling them into production. And these methodologies don't work without continuous engagement by our internal business partners. In the Agile Scrum language, the product owner has to be engaged daily to help drive toward outcomes. And because of the pace of change, strategy's got to be ongoing. Companies like TD Ameritrade drive a rolling 2-year plan that gets updated every quarter. Strategy changes quickly because the business competitive model changes quickly, and if they're trying to drive the strategy, they can't do it on an annual plan. Outcome management. Not only is strategy changing, but how I actually fund what I'm going to do. So companies out there, UniCredit out of Milan, big bank, one of the biggest in Europe, sets a fixed capital plan for the year, and some of the projects are more traditional IT type, where there is a waterfall process and they set up requirements and work on a big project or program. But more and more of the work is part of this business technology world. They fund an outcome. They say, here's where I'm going. I'm trying to improve my market penetration in a certain thing, consumer loans. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to say, here's $20 million. Go out and improve, do what you need to do to improve penetration of the Eastern European markets for consumer loans. And so business and IT get together and they say, how are we going to do that? What are we going to do? And they run it through Agile methodologies. They do test and learn. So they implement something, see how it works, and then respond to that. And then they do monthly review of how their projects are going and shift capital in a fixed annual budget among these projects. Now you start thinking, if this is complex work, and I'm shifting the strategy frequently, maybe quarterly, maybe every 6 months, and I'm outcome driven, and I'm going to have the ability to move capital around on maybe a monthly basis, what's that doing to my planning? Well, let's make it even worse. I'm going to put flexible sourcing in there. I might be jumping to the cloud in order to drive time to value and keep my capital expense down and keep myself focused on a narrow set of customer experiences. That cloud is a good option for that. Or I may be able to try to do some sort of a flexible resource programming. There's a Catalyst Dynamics, the companies out there will stand up a Scrum 20-person Scrum team in 24 hours anywhere in the U.S. All right, so these start to create a whole new set of options for how I actually deploy my technology. And finally, the architecture, the end-to-end work. I am now having to go back to that business, the office products company I talked about, office furniture. If that's end-to-end, I'm reaching through my distributors in order to automate how I interface with the customer. That's true end-to-end architecture. And I've got to be dealing with renewed master data management. I've got to look at systems I don't even own anymore. I've got to be driving in investment planning and structural shifts for exogenous changes I'd have no control over, much less in my own world where that complexity is driving that test and learn, and I'm coming up continuously with new approaches. And then that Home Depot architecture of a service, what I call continuous business services, that reach end to end and allow for some common and shared capabilities that are moderately stable and a great deal of variability where it differentiates my business. So hopefully I've got you guys on board for the kind of change that's coming. So let me tie it back up and sort of remind you of the storyline. It's all about technology dramatically transforming business. It starts with the customer. The digitally empowered customers' expectations are changing. It also happens to each of us as we work in a company. The fact that we experience the mobile mind shift, we understand what's changing because we experience day to day. We come into work, and that's how we expect, whether we're detailed dweebs or not, we expect the company to work that way. So companies are becoming driven not just by the customer, but all of the interfaces they use, and they're becoming digital businesses. They're becoming customer-obsessed digital businesses trying to understand and respond to changes incredibly fast. So that's that customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected. And in this context, then they're trying to compete in disrupted markets, disrupted industries where they want to be the disruptor, don't want to be the disrupted, and they've got to keep playing in different games as they go. Put technology management planning in here, budgets, annual cycle. Some of you guys out there do 2, 3, 4 year strategies, and that's it. Can't do that anymore. You got to pull your strategy in, at least annual, if not sub-annual. Then you're going to be driving shift in how you actually fund. So I'm going to put money into these digitally empowered things, both processes as well as engagements with employees, customers, trading partners, which is going to change maybe even intra-year. So I fund a fixed capital. Stakeholders kind of like that. They don't want that to vary. So then I've got to put some governance mechanism in to shift my planning, not only based on shifting strategies, but shifting realities in how I deploy, test and learn what's working and what's not. I'm driving to an outcome, but I'm navigating in a circuitous route as I figure that out. That's what's going on, and that's what's driving us to have to work on change. So far, I don't see any questions popping up. Let me remind you to put them in place as Matt, I pass control, or actually you take control back, and finish this off. And let me encourage everybody to put questions in the chat so we can deal with those as we get to the end of the content. Matt.
Thank you, Bobby. And Bobby, actually, don't worry. We have gotten a few questions. You and I just don't see them. They're going there to Matt and Lauren only, but a few have come through, and I'll read some of them. But it's a good reminder. If you do have any now that you still have, go ahead and shoot them in. We'll answer a couple in a few minutes. Well, Bobby, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I know you and I talked about this before, but I love the slide about I'll flip back to it even real quick. This slide about new technology management capabilities that are required by this move to customer obsession. I mean, this is a great slide. This is what so many of our customers are seeing and trying to make happen across all the things they do, from even just continuous planning, to focusing on outcomes, to looking at different ways to be flexible and variable. So that's really, really so essential. All right, so I'm going to share just a couple more things before we start answering some questions and move on. And really, it's a little bit about where we sort of fit Decision Lens into this puzzle. So if you think about what Bobby talked about, where I led with, hey, what's going to drive you to think about these changes in your technology planning, and what'll drive you to those changing tech management capabilities? What's often missing are key pieces of your planning. It's the forced alignment of resources to business strategy, not just putting a vision statement on the wall. It's clear understanding of trade-offs of every decision you make. When I pick this initiative, what am I giving up? It's knowing what's in the portfolio from beginning to end, what's next for scheduling, where do things rank, not just having a sort of day-to-day schedule of where your humans are going to be or where your money is going to be spent. And so it's these things about making your technology planning more strategic that are so often missing. And that, at some level, is what IT leaders are asked to do every day. I got this slide in front of you here that really is not meant to be earth-shattering or rocket science to anyone, but there are big functions that IT leaders do every day that essentially, encompass these pieces of technology planning, from strategy, from setting, the organizational strategy, to involving budgeting and finance just for the technology and IT side, to dealing with demand from the business units and from the different groups, to actually prioritizing and investing, to managing execution, which we're all pretty good at, to be honest. We've gotten to a point where we're great at execution. It's how do we know we're executing the right things? It's analyzing and reporting. It's ongoing review and management. It's these things that are somewhat of what make up technology planning. And what is interesting about these two, to me, especially to us, is that great solutions exist for many of these. From budgeting and finance, demand management, magazine execution, where your PPM systems fit in, analysis and reporting, where your BI systems fit in. We've got great partners in these areas, but unfortunately, solutions don't always exist that are analytics driven for everywhere. At that strategy, at that prioritization level, and on that ongoing review level, solutions don't really sit there. Analytic driven, allow you to be agile and effective, don't exist there. And so that's sort of where Decision Lens fits in. It's our goal in a lot of ways to simplify technology planning and making it more intelligent by filling in these gaps left by the platforms and systems that you already have inside. And so, long story short, we're for those of you who aren't our customers on the line or we haven't really met before, we're an enterprise SaaS software provider focused on those big issues, defining the business value of your activities and projects, whether you're doing them or not, looking into your portfolio from a business value perspective, prioritizing your highest value initiatives so you can make selections, so you can make decisions that are driven by priority and by business value and by criteria. You still make any decision you want. We're not making decisions for you. It's all about giving you the data to do that. And then identifying and reallocating inefficient resources. When I want to move things to be transformational and growth focused and not keep the lights on, I need to know what to move and what to reallocate. That's what Decision Lens focus on. So I won't dwell on anything, but I want to cover those three things real quickly, and then we'll get into Q&A and we'll wrap up today. At the strategy level, it's really focused on making it easy to see the visibility and the business value of every IT initiative. So I sort of drew a cartoon here to illustrate this a bit. But what it comes down to is if you're looking at three initiatives side by side, some might be ongoing, some may be new compared. And if you were to do sort of a traditional ranking process, you may end up with a value of all of them, and that may be exemplified by your bottom there, the sort of value. 0.56, 0.57, 0.53. Remember the numbers is how they ranked. You look at them real closely and they look very similar. How do you decide between them? Well, it really comes down, they have major differences to the business priorities they focus on. And this is what Decision Lens helps you do, is to map these initiatives to your business priorities individually so you can see, hey, Initiative 1 really supports Business Priority 2, Initiative 2 for Business Priority 3, and so on. And so it's okay, what's more important to me? What's more important to the business right now? Do I need to really delve into Business Priority 3 first? If so, Initiative 2 should get my focus. Do I need to dive into Business Priority 1 most? Initiative 3, despite having the lowest quote-unquote ranking, really becomes my focus. So really need to break that down business priority by business priority. And here's a quick view of that in the software, and we'd love to show you a full demo of it someday if you're interested. But you can look at all your initiatives on the right there and see how they compare to each business priority. My top mobile payment system, seems to do pretty well against a number of them, but others do better against only some of them. So as I improve my different business priorities, you'll see that my stack rank list of initiatives actually will change. So giving visibility to those business priorities is a huge missing piece in a lot of technology planning. The second is making it easy to bring transparency to trade-offs, funding, and allocation. And I again drew a simple cartoon here. Are we allocating more to business priority 1 or 2? We talked about that at the beginning because it's at the expense of the other always. Capability 1 or 2, business unit 1 or 2, or etc. Where am I pulling from? Because this is a zero-sum game in a day with resources and constraints. Where am I pulling from to fund that initiative or that capability? So here's again an example from the software of a very simple diagram. It says for all my initiatives, how do they serve against my big business priorities here of project risk or competitive impact or different things that make sense? And I can see I can fund one that is highest on corporate strategy alignment, but that is actually not highest other places, or highest on business unit strategy, but lowest on competitive impact. So what matters to me? You can see that visually, and it's hard to look at it as a group, as a stakeholder of what makes the most sense and what's most important. This is another view of comparing scenarios of fully fleshed out portfolios. All the different projects that are in it now built in. How do they compare? How much value am I getting? What capabilities am I serving more? Which priorities am I serving more, etc. It's having the visibility into that. And then finally, we're focused on dynamic continuous planning and making it a reality. And this one's pretty obvious, and Bobby even referred to this a bit there. As organizations move from 4-year planning only to single year or multi-year, or inside a year a couple times, it's essential because what you realize is that a annual business plan that you stick to the whole year will miss things like market shifts, competitive shifts, and strategy shifts. And so you need to look at the impact of changes like that whenever they arrive. And the way you do that, there are a number of steps within Decision Lens that help you do it. You regularly check in on your priorities. Have my priorities changed since last time we did this? Do I still value risk over revenue? Or now are we in a revenue driving cycle? Or are we in a competitive driven cycle? So I have to value competitive impact over anything else. So I confirm my priorities and I may change them, because when I change my priorities, number 2 below, my projects and initiatives and capabilities will then change based on how they deliver on those capabilities and business priorities. I'm going to look at that consistently, and I got to remap as it makes sense and see how they change, and then clearly define the trade-offs with stakeholders and compare those scenarios of those changes. And I look at that. What did it mean to the scenarios I've got in place and the portfolio I've got in place to make it happen? And so we give you the sort of analytics and the visualizations you need and the regular process you need to react to changes. Your executive team may decide we are investing in this now, July 1st, different than we thought on November 1st when we completed our annual plan last year. It's a different process in general. So sped through that, but at the end of the day, what Decision Lens is focused on is putting that idea of effective technology planning into the IT portfolio process. Making sure it fits in with what you already do with your portfolio, how you collect the ideas in demand management, how you select, how you do scenario planning, how you track and measure results. Those are the features, functions, analytics we've built into the software to make sure it aligns to your IT planning process and can make it even more effective than it has been in the past. All right, so with that, we can move into some Q&A here. We've got about 5 minutes, I think, for this. So, Bobby, I got a couple in here that I'm going to read to you, and then we can answer them as we go. First one here is for you, Bobby, and it refers to the 4 principles to becoming customer obsessed, the slide you showed of those 4 different principles people are working through. The question is, are they all equal? Do some organizations value any of the principles more than another, or work on one of them first before another?
Wow, that's a good one. I haven't bumped into that yet. The answer is that it is a mix, and the business strategy, probably driven by what sector you're in, what your role is in that sector, will cause it to vary. So, a retail-oriented company is likely to have a whole lot more focus on that customer-led opportunity. Than a company that's a B2B and driving, make to stock product, industrial sector company making make to stock. He'll be much more interested in probably fast and connected. Both of them are going to. Insights is probably the one that I've seen most consistently high end across everything. But there'll be some variation. So my recommendation is, as you look at what your strategy is, try to give a shirt size, a high, medium, low type of a ranking on those principles to see what you think in terms of how that strategy needs to play out, and ask your business partners to participate, so you get a view into how that's going to change your planning.
Yeah, in some ways, Bobby, this is what our customers do at the front end often of working with Decision Lens, because you're balancing those things side by side, and it may change over time. So you can get different stakeholders and different people's opinions to look through those big principles and say, what matters to us now, being fast or being more customer, obsessed, or I forgot the right word. I can scroll up and see it, but
customer led,
customer led. And you can allow the different executives and stakeholders to weigh in on that as it goes. So I like that. There was a follow up, same person actually. Similar question on those tech management capabilities. Do some organizations work on some of those first and prioritize some of those over the others? Be it's the ongoing planning, the continuous, all the different things there. Do anyone prioritize those over the other usually?
Yeah, that is the case. The underneath all of these are some more detailed capabilities. For instance, things like having a rich portfolio in which you capture not only the projects in flight, but the planning cycle, so all the requests, all the interdependencies, business impact, all those pieces that go into the linking the initiatives to the plan and driving stage gates as you do your prioritization, and that rolls into production. Those kinds of things are pretty much consistently important. But at the level of those 5 things, you'll see people who might not need or want to move to a full-blown continuous delivery, agile with DevOps. They might actually drive to chunk. I was working with a industrial sector firm the other day who's trying to chunk their larger projects into 3-4 month projects. So much more traditional waterfall, maybe water scrum fall. So they've pulled some continuous testing in, but they're not going for full blown continuous delivery. But they're getting some of the same benefits, and it does impact the planning. So this company actually had a 1.5, 2-year program they were driving, but they broke it into 5 parts, and they only funded each part after each next part after they finished one. So they actually reset their plans, even though there was a belief that they were going to do the whole thing. They tuned it as they went, but it was all waterfall. So that would be an example of where they were doing the outcome management type of funding, where they really thought they were going to drive the whole thing, but they were not doing Agile and DevOps. So yes, it's a blending of at that level of which ones they do first. The end-to-end architecture, probably a reach for some of you, just based on not having architecture in place. That would be another example where you'd have to lay some foundational work before you can actually do the end-to-end work, which is okay. Just depends on where you are. And rapid strategy, fast cycle strategy is probably the last one to happen for most companies, because roughly, as I mentioned earlier, roughly 70% of us don't have strategies we can plan from anyway.
Yeah, and that's so much of I think what makes creating a strategically driven technology planning process is hard, because we don't have a hard written strategy. And what we try and push IT leaders to do, I agree with you, is, well, how can you pull out the strategy based on what people's views of the world are and opinions are, who are your business leaders and your BU execs and your overall business execs. Get them to really compare things like competitive impact and risk, or growth and transformation, or new markets versus farming existing markets. And when you have them compare those things and you look at that on paper, involved in that is your current business strategy. And they certainly may make decisions to change that or move on it as they want to, but there's a business strategy in there, and that's what you can do by adding some data and adding some analytics to it. Well, Bobby, look, I appreciate it. We have a couple more questions here, but we're about out of time. And so I'll leave you all with a couple things. I appreciate you joining us today. We'll get out this recording and things to you as soon as we can get it processed. But to learn more as we walk out of here, don't hesitate to engage with Forrester at Forrester.com, or with Decision Lens at DecisionLens.com. And then you can see in action a lot of those screens I showed that build on strategy and prioritization and ongoing planning at our YouTube channel. YouTube.com/DecisionLens is loaded with individual videos focused just on those features, focused just on those visualizations to making them happen. So with that, it's about 1 o'clock. Don't want to keep anybody late. We thank you all for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on the next Decision Lens webcast. And Bobby, thanks a lot again for joining us today and adding your expertise.
Most welcome. My pleasure. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you.